Put some oomph in it. All right. Good morning. My name is Emma Schwartz, and I'm Chair of the Agency Operations Committee. It is 11:42 a.m., and I would like to call the January 25th Agency Operations Committee meeting to order. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. Welcome Wilson, Vice Chair.
Present.
Javed Anwar, not present. Fred Farias.
Present.
Robert Gaunt.
Present.
Donna Williams.
Present.
Georgia, I'm going to say it wrong.
Haney, but here.
Haney, student member, and myself, Emma Schwartz. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Agenda item 2 is approval of the meeting minutes from the October 26, 2022 Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Wilson, a second. Second by Ms. Williams. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The motion passes. Agenda item 3 is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify today, so we will go on to the next item. Agenda item 4 is approval of the consent calendar. We do not have any items on the consent today, so we will move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 5A is a report on grants and contracts. This item does not require any action. Members, the reports were included as supplemental materials with the agenda materials you received prior to the meeting. Ms. Linda Natal, Director of Contracts and Grant Management, is available if you have any questions. Nope. Okay, that's easy. I think everyone's hungry. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 5B is an update on the 88th legislative session. This item does not require any action. Ms. Amy Peterson, Assistant Commissioner for External Relations, will present this item and be available for questions. Ms. Peterson.
Our last update in October, the 88th session was convened, and things are starting to slowly pick up. There haven't been any changes in state leadership. Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick both won re-election in November, and Speaker Phelan was reelected by the House earlier this month. Senate committee assignments were released on Monday. As expected, the Senate Education Committee and the Senate Higher Education Subcommittee will both be chaired by Senator Brandon Creighton, and Senate Finance will be chaired by Joan Huffman. We're expecting House committee assignments to come out probably in early February. The comptroller released his biennial revenue estimate on January 9th. The legislature is going to have about $188 billion for general spending this session. It's about a 26% increase over last session. That amount includes a fiscal year 23 general revenue ending balance of $32 billion. They're also going to have about $26 billion in the rainy day fund at the end of fiscal year 25, assuming they don't appropriate any money out of it. So with this record-breaking surplus in mind, the House and Senate both filed their initial budget bills on January 18th. Both bills include about $27 billion in all funds for higher education. The coordinating board is going to receive about $2.3 billion in both bills. That's a small all funds decrease due to the expiration of our federal GEAR dollars. And but that's offset by a large general revenue increase. And that additional general revenue funding, it's allocated mainly in our healthcare related programs, including the Texas Child Mental Health Care Consortium, GME expansion, and the nursing faculty and mental health professionals loan repayment programs. We've also got a little bit additional funding in the Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program. Both bills also include $2.5 billion contingent on further action by the legislature to increase higher education endowment funding. Also, both bills have $650 million contingent upon passage of community college finance legislation. So that community college contingency rider, it tracks really closely to the recommendations of the Texas Commission on Community College Finance. That's going to include, the rider actually directly includes an additional 428 million for formula funding under the new system on top of what they already get. 33 million for institutional innovation and capacity grants, and an estimated 50 million in tuition assistance for economically disadvantaged dual credit students. It also appropriates an additional 139 million for the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program. That stands out because it's really unusual to see increases in financial aid in the introduced budget bills. Both bills also include a state employee pay raise of 5% in each fiscal year. For the coordinating board, that represents a funding increase of about 4 million. And then the only higher ed difference between the two chambers in those bills is an intent rider that's included in the House budget that's related to college affordability, which is going to continue to be a big topic this session. So looking ahead, now that both budgets have been filed and the Senate committees announced, the Senate is going to start moving really quickly, especially on the budget. We have been invited to provide testimony on Senate Bill 1, their budget, on February 7th. We're probably, as soon as those House committees get announced, we're going to be hearing the same thing from House Appropriations. So we can probably see that middle to late February. After committees begin meeting, the next big milestone for the legislature is going to be the bill filing deadline on March 10th, where we'll see a huge influx of filed bills. And then during the session, you can expect to get monthly updates from us, and those are going to coincide with important legislative deadlines and milestones. But please let us know if there's any information that y'all need or issues that you want to discuss with us or get more engaged in at the Capitol, and we'd be happy to help make that happen. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Peterson, I have a question. First, thank you for the work that you do. So important for the state, not only coordinating board, but the entire state. My question is, I believe this is the first time there's been a subcommittee for higher education. Is that correct? Or
It's not the first time. Back, I think when the commissioner and I were both younger staffers.
but it's been a while. We won't say how long, but let's just say there's been one in the past. So
Yeah.
what is the significance of that? And do you see that more obviously higher education issues in the subcommittee? Is that because there's a lot of work on the, K-12, or what are your thoughts?
Frankly think it's more about the choice of chairman. Because back when under Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, it had been a single committee, and then he split it out because I think, frankly, it just gave him another leadership position to create. As a
Isn't the
separate
chairman
committee.
the same?
Well, this time it is. And so I think putting those two committees back together, it kind of consolidates that authority under a single chairman. So.
Okay. And when do you have any information about when the House is going to do their committees? Of course, that's a big question.
So their preference cards are due, I think, tomorrow. And so then it'll take a week or two for them to kind of get a plan situated on who they want to name to what. So I think early to mid-February, we'll get the assignments.
Okay. The financial aid part that you emphasize is really good news.
Yeah, very.
As far as that's concerned. Yeah.
Yeah. How does is SB1, is that where all this money is sitting?
The Senate version is SB1. The House version is HB1. HB1 will be the one you see move.
Right.
this
And
time.
then the 600,000 or 600 million for finance, is that community college finance? Does that kind of fall in line with our recommendations? I mean, have our recommendations, does this, if passed, does that help us implement what we visioned?
So we were very pleased with the language of the contingency rider. Pretty closely tracks the recommendations of the commission. So the full package of the commission's recommendations were essentially included in the contingency rider. So that as Amy mentioned, about 600 million across student financial aid, the formulas and the capacity grants, plus an additional $50 million in a new financial aid for students in dual credit programs. So it's the full $650 million package, including the financial aid.
That's great.
It's a very strong position out of the blocks. So we were delighted to see that, and also delighted to see the both House and Senate also had the contingency riders for $2.5 billion to set up new endowment for emerging research universities that don't benefit from the permanent university fund.
That's great. According to Mr. Torrance percentages, we got some high stepping to do. So
if I may, though, just to underline a point Amy mentioned, like it's striking that the financial aid for community colleges was included, but they don't generally include increases to financial aid. So like our number one exceptional item was at least to appropriate enough additional general revenue to make sure we don't lose ground on those percentages of eligible students who are receiving state financial aid. They're going to have to put some additional money in just to make sure we don't fall back. And ideally, we would even be able to go further. And so it's even in proposals that you see from the universities and university systems, there's not much mention of financial aid. It's really the coordinating board that's going to be, and we'll have to look to you all for your help on this, to help engage with the members, to help inform them about here's where we are and here's why these important investments in students are going to be so important on student financial aid. Also, just as a point of information, our other exceptional items around recurring funding for the data infrastructure, recurring funding for our work on college and career advising, or the kind of innovation work that we've done with C grants with new programs and digital learning and student success programs. So all of those were part of our exceptional items in our legislative appropriations request. Those were not funded in the filed version of the budget. So we'll want to continue to help inform discussions about why we have that request and why those would be important, so that all these one-time investments to get new infrastructure in place, we'd be sure that we'd have the recurring funding to be able to operate the data system and to be able to operate the student advising structure and to do outreach and continue to support the institution. So none of that is in the filed version of the budget, and we'll have to continue to be worked on through the appropriations process.
yeah, I know there's a hesitancy to fund something as a one-time that's going to take on a life of its own and require sustaining funding because it's not pretty fair to the program. Or
that's absolutely right. That's often one of the first questions I get from Chair of Appropriations or from the governor is, is this a one-time expense or a recurring expense? And so they do want to keep an eye. They do keep a careful eye on where where they're actually taking on a recurring expense that's going to continue to be an expectation for future legislation.
I know they've been prudent in not taking certain federal dollars for that reason.
So even though I'm not a member of the committee, can I ask a question? And my question is this: if you listen to both Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Governor Abbott's inaugural addresses, they heavily emphasized this massive surplus, whatever it is, 27 billion or whatever it is, surplus we have. And of course, the big thrust was to return a lot of that to the taxpayer. But given that there is this massive surplus, does this bode well for our opportunity to, and how do we take advantage of that?
I think absolutely on a couple of fronts. So first, there was actually an article in Inside Higher Ed in the last couple of weeks where they were talking about where states are and sort of what the outlook is for higher education. And one of the things that highlighted is that even in states that have surpluses, the outlook for higher education doesn't necessarily look great. Texas, and I was quoted saying something along these lines, but in Texas, it's pretty striking that they put down a marker for another $650 million for community colleges and another $2.5 billion for emerging research universities under the spending limit in the filed version of the budget. So before they've even taken up the question of where they're going to spend some of the surplus and, how much are they doing for property tax relief and how much are they doing for other priorities, they've already put a substantial marker down for higher education. So I think that does bode very, very well and has already gotten some national attention that Texas seems to be heading in a little different direction on higher education than you see in other states.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
it would be nice to get out of the bottom quintile.
well, you know.
And we have the resources
The resource,
to do it.
it's all it takes is resources, right? So, but it doesn't happen by accident. The commissioner has been worked very hard and the staff, the coordinating board. There's a lot of work. It's like Sam, you and I love baseball, and the off season is where it's really done, the work to prepare. And I will give the commissioner and his staff credit, meeting with the governor's staff and our staff here at the coordinating board, working to prepare for this legislative session. And that's why it's gotten there. It just doesn't happen by accident. So I just want to let everybody, everybody knows that, but just emphasize that work has been going on for a year or so. And that's why we're prepared. And so the staff and the commissioner, thank you for doing that. And that's why we're at where we're at. And now we just got to keep track to make sure it gets across the finish line. Like you said, we're just getting off the block, right?
Yeah, but I will say, it just like the conversations I've had with the leadership on the House and Senate side of the Speaker's office, the Lieutenant Governor's office, and in meetings with Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker or the Governor and his team. Regularly we talk about what are the kinds of investments we need to make for the future. If we look out 20, 30, 40 years, what are those kinds of strategic investments? So I think already they sent a powerful message in this filed version of the budget from the House and the Senate that they're investing for the longer term, in especially around workforce education and the community colleges and around our sort of research and development infrastructure with the emerging research universities. So I do think that there's a willingness to commit resources if we can make the case for what that long-term impact is going to be. Yeah. And so around making sure that there's affordability for students, that they can access these programs, making sure we're going to have more of the kinds of programs that we need, that the student support structures are going to be in place so that students are going to complete credentials, and that we're going to have a clearer line of sight to what we're going to need for the jobs of today and tomorrow. So we were looking back, it was actually only a year ago that you all adopted the Talent Strong Texas plan. So it was the January meeting. So the timing was very good for us to be able to inform the work in the interim that led up to the filed version of the budget. And it feels like we've got momentum. So I'm looking forward, in partnership with the board and the foundation board, to continuing to inform these conversations where Texas has an opportunity to invest for the future.
And again, I'm glad you brought up the foundation, because the foundation is a great portion of this. And sometimes we don't, talk about it much, but the meeting this afternoon, and we have a couple more board members that are on it. But I'll tell you that partnership has really taken it to a new level. And that's been able to provide a lot of resources and contacts. And thank you. Well, I see Melissa Henderson back here, our chief of staff, as well as the executive director of the Texas Higher Education Foundation. But they have been a great partner as well. So it takes a team, right? And so there's been a lot of these discussions going on. And if Melissa calls you and say, hey, do you know corporations and people that can help us, take her calls, please, because it really makes a difference.
Absolutely. Okay. Are there any more questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Peterson. Moving on to agenda item 6A. It's review of the fiscal year 2023 financial report to the board. This item does not require any action. Mr. Anthony Infantini, Chief Financial Officer, will present this item to the committee and be available for questions. Mr. Infantini. Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Anthony Infantini. I joined the coordinating board as CFO in November. I'm looking forward to working with you all, and it's my pleasure to present the financial report. So this financial report is the first 3 months of fiscal year 2023. The state fiscal years begin September 1st. 2023 is the second year of a 2-year biennium. The prior legislature, they approved the spending through August 2023, and the current money we're talking about with the current legislature will be September 2023 through August of 2025. In the report here, there's a number of budget adjustments. I want to just point out they're really attributed it to 2 main categories. One is gear money. Gear money is money we received in advance of our state fiscal year, but we have the authority to spend that this year. In order to do that, we do budget adjustments to move that money into our current fiscal year for spending. And then we also have unexpended balance or UB adjustments, which are typically found in our agency's riders, which are in the budget. And they provide authority to move money usually within a biennium. So in the second year of a biennium, you'll see a lot of those adjustments as the money is rolled forward from the first year to the second year for spending. Overall, in reviewing the report, there's no red flags or major concerns. There are some negative amounts that really were just due to timing in our systems of, when those UB adjustments are reflected and when items are cleared up in our spending from the first year. So they've either already been cleared up or they will clear up in a future budget adjustment. Moving ahead to kind of our bond issue, I want to give the folks an update here. We have successfully reserved our volume cap for issuing bonds for the 2023 to 24 academic year. We're targeting right now a mid-July receipt of bond proceeds. We were building in a lot of flexibility though to be able to accelerate that, should the economic conditions warrant. One other thing we're looking at actively, and it ties in a lot to what discussions I've had this morning, is looking at loan demand and what it might be next year and kind of using that information to help kind of make sure we're issuing the right size of bonds. And as the spring semester develops, we should have a better idea as far as that goes. And the other one item that I want to report is there have been some positive changes in the municipal bond market, certainly since January. And actually, we are looking at the potential of refunding or refinancing our 10-year callable bonds this summer. It wasn't something we thought would happen given the way interest rates were trending last year, but as of now, it looks like it's potentially something we could consider. So we're keeping every option open. We're going to continue to monitor it, and if it can lower our overall costs and it's beneficial to do so, it's something we may pursue. And with that, I kind of wrap up and let me know if you have any questions.
Well, Mr. Infantini, first of all, welcome again.
Thank you.
And, we have at least one or two experts on our board that do this for a living. So they may be calling you and quizzing you, but they are also available. I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about, and you definitely call Anthony anytime.
Yes, I would.
But I know that there are some shifts, and it's not me, by the way, but there are some shifts going on, as we know. But I just want to offer you, our board members, expertise if you need any sounding board or anything like that.
I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you very much, Mr. Infantini. And welcome. All right, agenda item 7A is consideration and possible action to approve the updated internal audit charter. Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and is available to answer any questions. Mr. Pale.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm seeking your approval today of our internal audit charter, which was last updated and approved in 2018. The internal audit charter is a formal document that defines our purpose, authority, and responsibility. The charter establishes the internal audit's position within the organization, authorizes access to records, personnel, and physical properties relevant to the performance of engagements, and defines the scope of internal audit activities. This is fairly straightforward, but also critically important document. It affirms the board's commitment to our independence and our full and unfettered access to all aspects of the coordinating board. The board level approval of our internal audit charter is required by our professional standards. It's a best practice. And if you think about it, it's timely given the changes, the significant changes in our board composition since its last approval in 2018. The changes to the prior version are presented in your materials and are limited to the change in my job title since 2018. That is a short presentation on the charter. I'm happy to address any questions, and I'm seeking your approval.
Are there any questions on the charter? If not,
I have a question.
go ahead.
How often do we have to update the charter?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. The charter is, there is not a defined interval for update, 2 to 3 years, I think. And that 2 to 3 years would potentially be shortened if there were significant changes in professional auditing standards. That could potentially necessitate, a 1 year,
Mhm.
let's say, change. But absent that, every 2 to 3 years would be a good cadence to make sure that our newest board members are, fully aware of and endorse the work that we do.
All right,
I know
thank you.
in banking, we have to do it every year.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's right. So that's something we can discuss, although we're going on 4 years now, it looks like. But
Yes,
I think Mr. Anwar and I are the only ones on the board that did the charter last time.
right.
So, yeah,
right.
so, yeah, so that's one thing that we can discuss as board members, if we want to do it more frequently. What is the advantage or disadvantage of doing them sooner? Or like Ms. Schwartz said, some groups do it yearly.
I think part of it is just an affirmation, just a review and affirmation and commitment to audit is the reason most people do it annually.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Certainly happy to bring it, to the board more often than 4 years, certainly, but, we
Yeah.
can do it annually or every other year.
there's still
Yeah.
pretty minimal changes right now,
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so do I have a motion for the updated internal audit charter?
So move, Donna.
Ms. Williams,
Mhm.
and a second by Mr. Gaunt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. And the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Pale. Agenda item 7B is discussion of an audit report of the distribution of the National Research University Fund issued on October 2022 by the State Auditor's Office. This item does not require any action. Ms. Christie Subar, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Managing Senior Auditor, and Ms. Angela Ramirez, Assistant State Auditor from the State Auditor's Office, will present this item and be available for questions. Welcome.
Oh. How about now? Awesome. My name is Christy Schrubar. I am the project manager for this audit that is related to the National Research University Fund. And with me, I have Angelica Ramirez, the Assistant State Auditor. I will discuss our audit report and a summary of our findings. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So the objective of this audit is to determine whether the University of Texas at San Antonio met the eligible requirements to receive the National Research University funds. This audit covered FY fiscal years 2020 and 2021. This report is broken into two parts. One is dedicated to the University of Texas at San Antonio, and the other one is dedicated to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So with that, I'll break into the chapters. Chapter 1 was UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio, and their results. And we determined if they met the eligibility requirements. One of the requirements is that they must expend $45 million in research funds for 2 consecutive fiscal years. We did identify they had processes to identify expenditures and awards. However, we did see some weaknesses. As a result, one of the years did not meet the requirements, and that was fiscal year 2020. But 2021 did meet the requirements. There's also additional criteria, other criteria per the Texas Administrative Code that the university must meet 4 out of the 6. The university did meet 4 of those 6, and they were related to freshman class of high academic achievement, memberships, high quality faculty, and high quality graduate education. We also tested internal controls. We also tested general controls, and those were adequately working. Chapter 2, the coordinating board, was same thing as previous reports. We had no findings, and they had actually implemented the prior year recommendations. So on reporting the accurate information. If there's no other questions, this concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
So my question is, does the UT system also do this with their other institutions at this level?
Well, this is the National Research Fund universities. So per the statute, there's only a limited eligible universities, and most of those are the UT system.
Right. So my
Schools.
question though is, does the UT system, do they do this as well internally? Or do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, not this type of audit, because this is a statutory requirement.
Okay.
So they do audit, they do assess their own controls and stuff, and we met with internal audit, but they do not conduct this audit.
Okay, so you mentioned, and by the way, thank you for all your work. My question is, probably takes a lot of time, right? To
Does.
do these type of audits. So thank you for doing that. But I'm trying to figure out, you said it's 2 consecutive years. Was there an exception made? Or because you said they did it the following year, or?
So when a university is eligible for this national research, they will apply to the coordinating board and
Right.
issue a report saying we're eligible.
Right.
The coordinating board, will state auditor's office, and let us know that they are ready to be reviewed. So this report, UTSA submitted they were eligible for FY 20 and 21.
Right.
So honestly, it just depends when the university says we're ready and eligible,
Okay.
and when the coordinating board presents that letter to us.
Okay. No, that answers the
So
question.
is it, so based on the, and I understand the test, you have to, it's not just research on the, on the list, but it's actually dollars out the door, I believe, in research.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
So it's, so
Mhm.
which
That's
means
right.
you're actually deploying it, which is good.
Right, right.
So based on this, would they just need to reapply next year, or is it at the coordinating board level to decide where to draw the line, or?
We did have discussions with both the coordinating board and the university. They are more than welcome to apply and to apply for whenever they're ready to meet the
So it
eligibility.
sounds like they're likely to qualify next round.
Yes, from conversations, yes, that is what my understanding is. There
And
will be
refresh
some-
my memory, in the NRUF, there's 9 universities or 12, I can't remember, 11, I can't remember how many were on the
Oh,
list.
I don't know exactly, but I can tell you the previous one was UT Arlington that met the requirements. University of Houston, there's about, I believe there's
Texas
9.
Tech,
But how many have made it?
University
Yeah,
of
how many
Dallas.
have made it so far? I think it's only like 5, right?
I
Or-
believe it's, I would have to, I believe it's 4 that have qualified, they would have been the 5th.
So 4 qualified out of 9 on the list.
Yeah, so far, they would have been the 5th.
And clarify, only 5 had applied so far. The others have not
Yeah,
applied
and at
yet.
the time, I think they had identified 9 universities in the state that had a fighting chance of hitting the mark.
Yeah.
And they were identified, and that NRUF was, and then there's a formula to,
There's the coordinating, so it's there's the 8 emerging research universities that are based on the coordinating board's accountability classification. So the coordinating board actually defines those classifications for the emerging research universities. And so we have, so the board has a role in making this recommendation, but the criteria, as you implied, they're outlined in statute for
Right.
qualification. Of course, there's going to be a lot of discussion about emerging research universities, and so the legislature could change the criteria. But if they don't, then presumably UTSA would be able to apply and would be, it looks like would be eligible next year.
and I know there's money held aside for future qualifiers. So it's not all, it's not like
Sort of. I
if you
mean,
get in too late, then it's all
and
gone. It's kind of a.
unfortunately, I mean, the way this works is, and at least in its current configuration. So this is one of the things I think there'll be some discussion about. In its current configuration, it just slices the pie differently. So when UTSA comes in, that actually means it's a smaller allocation to
Right.
Houston and to Tech and to Dallas and to Arlington. So UTSA not being eligible this year meant those other 4 institutions did get a slightly larger.
Yeah, I mean,
did
but
get
yeah, I think
slightly
the
larger
idea, if I
allocation.
recall at the time, was we want to get the money, we want to get this money out to these universities. We don't want to wait 10 or 20 years for them to qualify because with the money.
Yeah.
But I think this money came from something that was sitting on the side that never got used.
And it's invested by the Safekeeping Trust. There's about $900 million in the corpus now for this fund. But again,
Wow.
there'll be a lot of discussion about kind of what this looks like and what other kinds of investments they'd want to make, especially around the non-puff institutions.
If you mind, oh, go ahead.
Question, since they applied for, I'm sure applies the right word, fiscal year 20 and 21, where does the fiscal year start and were they impacted by COVID? And if so, was there an exempt or a waiver, or did they add the months that COVID would have taken out of their fiscal year to make that up on the back end before we finish the audit?
The university certified that they met the requirements for fiscal years FY 20 and 21. So that is what we tested.
Okay.
That is expenditures for COVID. So we did consider, of course, COVID factors, and we tested expenditures, but there was nothing related directly to that.
Yeah.
To
When are the fiscal years? When do they begin?
September 1st
September.
is just like the
Okay.
state, September 1st through August 31st.
Okay. Okay.
And this is a significant amount of unallowable expenditures. Is there a confusion with the formula? What are the expenditures that are being counted? And does it have anything to do with the subrecipient between universities? Remember that issue?
So the expenditures of course, we use the coordinating board's criteria for the specifics of a definition of a research fund expenditure, and we tested it to that. So the majority of this was just not classified correctly as an expenditure.
So it was how it
so
was
they-
used or the source?
It was that they didn't classify correctly that it was a research expenditure. So it was how it was used, and then sort of the accounting on
So the
what
money
they
might have been
counted.
used on something administrative, not research or.
That they shouldn't strictly count as a
Okay.
research expenditure. And so when the state auditor's office looked more closely at applying those criteria, there were some of those expenditures that they disallowed, that they said that those should not have been counted as research expenditures.
Okay.
So I just wanted to thank you all, Ms. Ruber and Ms. Ramirez, for being here and the hard work that the Texas State Auditor's Office does. And thank you for spending time working closely with the coordinating board. We appreciate you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Okay, agenda item 7C, numbers 1 through 3 are the auditor's update on the internal audit reports and activities. These items do not require any action. Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayert, Assistant Director, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and are here available to answer questions. Mr. Pale?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. For the internal audit update, today we have 3 reports on the agenda, and they should be in your materials. And in the interest of time, I was going to touch on 2 of the items in your packet. First, we have our annual report that covers activity across our department. It includes important performance measures we track, and it acknowledges our independence. Examples of measures that we track include timely reporting, accomplishment of our approved plans, as well as the appropriate use of audit time. The other document that I wanted to draw your attention to that you have in your materials is called a corrective action status report, and it's dated December 2022. That report is it's got the green and yellow highlighting in your materials. You might recall this related to a recommendation from our most recent external quality assurance review. The document tracks internal audit or other audit recommendation, and it provides you with an all-inclusive list and whether or not the recommendations have been implemented. We highlight in red any recommendation items that have unjustified delays or where management is not moving forward in mitigating identified risks. I'm happy to report the document has no items in red for your attention at this time. That concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, that's great news.
Yes.
Well, good work on that progress. Any questions?
No, I just want to make a comment, Madam Chair, to thank Mr. Pale and his staff for keeping yourself as chair of the AOC.
Yes, thank you.
Vice Chair Williams and myself updated. I do read your reports, so the board is aware that we get quite a few detailed reports on investigations, evaluations and things. So I appreciate the updates and keeping us on what you're doing. between board meetings. So we do read those. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great communication.
Question every now.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to agenda items 8A, 1 through 7 are the auditor's update on state and federal compliance monitoring reports and activities. These items also do not require any action. Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayert, Assistant Director, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and are available to answer questions.
Thank you again. I will ask Mr. Mayor to provide this update.
Mr. Pale, thank you, Madam Chair. We completed 7 state compliance monitoring projects since our prior AOC meeting in October, and each of the reports are included in your materials. I'd like to highlight 2 of the reports with observations. First, the audit of Texas tuition equalization grant at Wayland Baptist University. This report includes an observation related to eligibility requirements. In particular, the university did not properly document one student's selective service registration prior to making a TEG award. The institution relied on incomplete student aid application information and did not verify the student's selective service registration at the time of the award. The institution has adjusted its procedures and initiated a refund for the ineligible reward back to the coordinating board. Next, I'd like to highlight a review of Texas Equal Educational Opportunity Grant, TEOG, at Howard College. This report includes an observation related to student eligibility as well. The institution did not provide adequate matching of tuition and fees as required by the grant. The institution cooperated fully to address the error and for current as well as future awards, and to also take appropriate action to address prior issues with prior students so they can benefit from the required minimum financial aid funding levels that are intended by the grant. Next, I'd like to point you to the new section on the blue page entitled Compliance Monitoring Corrective Actions Status Report. This is similar to the internal audit report, although in this case, it's included in the blue page. As briefly noted in our last update, this report will be an ongoing list of recommendations that have appeared in our state compliance monitoring reports. New recommendations will appear at the bottom of the list. And as you can see from Howard County Junior College and Wayland Baptist University, and the 2 reports with new recommendations for this quarter. And as recommendations are verified as complete, we produce a corresponding follow-up report, and the recommendations will be noted as verified and then removed from the report on the next cycle. For example, we have a follow-up report and the materials indicated that the recommendation for Vernon College has been verified as complete. This item will not appear on next quarter's report. Our goal with this report is to provide an ongoing tracking report for outstanding recommendations. In the future, we may attach this information as a separate report like we did with the internal audit report rather than inserting it in the blue page. It helps with the timing of information on as we provide it to other people at the board. And lastly, I'd like to also talk about the federal compliance monitoring area. With regard to federal compliance monitoring, we've completed all of the FY21 gear subrecipient monitoring reviews and are planning our next cycle of FY22 gear reviews. We continue to coordinate our work with the new grant management personnel, and note that we continue with subrecipient monitoring reviews directed to reviewing the documentation so far and intend to look at more detailed information in the very near future with regard to that folder review, and as well as continue with our setup over the next year. That concludes my compliance monitoring update. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
That's great. I love the findings log. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Pale and Mr. Mayor. Hearing none, we will move forward with this very important agenda item. Agenda item number 9 is adjournment. This concludes the Agency Operations Committee meeting. The time is 12:25. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Wilson, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Farias, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against say no. The motion passes. Thank you all very much.
Don't forget about tonight, the meeting.
Oh, okay.
with the-